Taxicab Authority Board of the State of Nevada. It's Wednesday, June 17, 2026. The hour is 9:34 a.m. We are at the Nevada State Business Center, 3300 West Sahara Avenue, Suite 400, Las Vegas, Nevada. The record should reflect that we have a quorum present. Vice Chair Graff, members Decker, member Weekly, and myself, Dan Research Chair. So I will call us to order, and I will ask Vice Chair to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Having reviewed affidavits, posting, and confirmation receipts, it appears this matter has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law. Do you concur, Madam Secretary? That'll take us to our first public comment section. This matter set on our agenda for the purposes of taking public comments pursuant to Nevada's open meeting law. We welcome members of the public providing their thoughts, information, concerns regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the board. May not take action on those matters today, but we certainly do want to hear from you. Is there any member of the public present in the hearing room in Las Vegas who wishes to provide public comment? Seeing none, is there anybody hearing or participating remotely who would like to provide public comment? No. Hearing no public comment, we'll close the first public comment section and that takes us to agenda item 3, which is approval of the board meeting minutes of March 18, 2026 and April 16, 2026. The board members have had an opportunity to review those draft minutes. And I will be abstaining from comment or action on the April 16, 2026 meeting because I was not present. Are there any additions, changes, or corrections to the minutes of March 18, 2026? Hearing none, are there any additions, changes, or corrections to the minutes of April 16, 2026?
Okay, yeah. Did some changes. They're in this version that's in the thing.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion for approval of the March meeting agenda or March meeting minutes.
I was not present, so I will.
I'll move.
Okay.
I'll move to approve those meetings.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the March 18th agenda meeting minutes, excuse me, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Member Decker abstaining, correct? On the April 16, 2026 minutes, do I have a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I should show my abstention. Takes us to agenda item number 4, which is on our calendar today for industry discussion as usual. This is an opportunity for members of the industry to provide comments and or suggestions, concerns, recommendations, angst, whatever might exist. Is there any member of the industry that would like to address us at this time? Seeing that everyone is beating a hasty path to the podium, I'll close industry discussion. Takes us to agenda item 5. This matter is regularly on our agenda as an oversight matter for the pilot programs that are continuing, have been for a number of months. for testing different platforms for rideshare applications for taxis. And I see that our deputy administrator is present and ready to tell us all about what's going on.
Good morning, Curtis Mell, Deputy Administrator for Taxicab Authority. It's been 2 months since we talked about it, so we can go over the April and May stats on there. In the book, there was the orange tab. Quickly get you to the stats. For April, there was 19,500 rides that brought in an additional $305,000. That is roughly $1,562 per trip on average, which is pretty good. That was an increase of 5,000 over March. But unfortunately in May, we dropped down to 15,600 trips for a revenue of 229. The average trip dropped about $1 down to 1463. I don't have any real explanation of why the drop other than if it has to do with EDC over that weekend and that time frame. There was more options for the drivers at that point and more availability for taxis than the normal. We had a good month overall for the trips that you'll hear about later. I did reach out. There was a question about the turn up ratio from Uber and what they were looking at. And it basically comes down to the more rides that are accepted, the higher they'll turn up. So kind of the supply and demand, the more the cab drivers accept rides, the more Uber will give more back out. So that's about it. It's pretty simple. Any questions? Happy to answer.
Questions?
Want to address like individual stats and stuff like that? Because I mean, numbers went down both in trips and dollars from April to May, and it appears that and yet the number of drivers went up precipitously from March to April to May. And then I think what you were just describing was the trips turned away topic is somehow a function of how active you are, there's going to be more people turned away. Right. That's a lot. I mean, it's like 200,000. Am I reading that right?
The drop in money
Or
the
trips
turnovers?
turned away. It's 580 to 760.
Yeah. Yeah, you are correct. Like I said, over May with EDC being here, there was the surcharge was an option for drivers or just more passengers in the normal way of getting a taxi, the taxi stand and that kind of area.
But we're going to see EDC numbers today.
We do have them available.
So how many, what tab do I look at to see how many EDC trips there were? Because if there's a difference of like, 2,000 trips, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's in the administrator's report section. Eight. Yes. Yeah.
I turned right to it.
There you go.
Is it also a function? What has changed? If anything, about the ride fairly low? Is that changed or is it?
We're kind of hitting around that $15.
Yeah.
It's kind of steadied around there, where the average taxi ride, I believe, is around $20. So
$5 more.
yeah,
So it's
it is more lucrative for a cab driver to do it the usual way as opposed to, and this was, something to help secondary. So, and that's when you see the turn down rate is probably why, because when they see the offer and they see that I can go sit in the stand and it's turning pretty fast.
Are we in a fuel surcharge right now?
Yeah,
And it looks like there was 1,500 pickups and drop offs.
Yeah.
So that kind of does seem to make sense. I just wanted to correlate the two so that we're not saying, hey, we've got a blip in this pilot program, or you tell me, actually, do you think there's a blip in the pilot program, or is it just because of that Fed?
it's hard to say. If it's sustained through June, then there's something else going on. If the turnaways, because the fuel surcharge did go in effect. I don't have the date handy, but we did go up a tier on the fuel surcharge. So the normal rate of taxi may be better. It's hard to understand all the dynamics in there. If someone from one of the companies wants to give a better explanation on what's happening on the Ubers, I don't have the insight of everything. I just see the end result.
Well, they're at one level, we're looking at marginal revenue. If the purpose of this is to increase how many trips taxis are getting and overall income. So I think it's not failing in that respect.
No.
It's also, I think, to my view, I'm not sure we can discern the behavior of taxi drivers as a group, because some will want to take that incremental revenue and the others may want to go get a cup of coffee, I just,
Yeah, those stats in tab 8 show that the average pickup is about 130
right.
to $200. So I get it. You're gonna go to do that if you have the opportunity to do it. That's probably, I would suppose that might have something to do with some of the additional
That's
drops.
part of the story. There's more.
Yeah.
Say again.
There's more to that story.
Yeah.
Michael Bale and Taxi Management. Besides the fact that the fares at our company are more than 50% below what the regulated cab fare, about 97% of our customers who are using a credit card give a gratuity. About 21% of our Uber customers leave a gratuity. So the driver's not getting it from either end, and it's just not very profitable.
Yeah. I was,
Yeah.
Athen Revelos, Curb Mobility. I was going to speak more to the statistical side of things. The numbers in a program like this, especially, I mean, when did it introduce to Vegas with Z Trip? October? Yeah. This is still in its infancy, really. So that process, because you have to remember the funnel of those trips, it's coming from a third-party aggregator, and how their marketing and how their pricing affects the volume that the drivers are going to complete, right? And Mr. Bailey just addressed, there's one particular issue that the drivers aren't fond of. So that's something that's made out externally, a decision made externally, and a business model that's made externally. So that's going to affect those numbers. And then on our side, as Curb, we are also working with Uber in this instance to, sort of make the product to optimize it, right? So that everyone is getting something out of it substantial. So you'll notice in the next month's report, actually, the number of completed trips is going to vastly increase from us because we've made some changes in how those trips are offered. And so we've noticed we made the switch, I think, like about a week ago, and the number, it's not, it didn't go into the thousands a day, but it went from a basically less than interesting number to like, oh, well, this is interesting. There's actually some volume here. So things like that are going to happen. In other markets, I've seen that the product itself, and I refer to it as a product because it's one of our products, uh, doesn't really fully mature until probably 18 to 24 months in any given market. And I would say Vegas probably take longer. And the objective of the product is really to just, I would suggest really focusing on total trips completed on, and for the industry as a whole. Because again, the Uber is not supposed to replace the taxi trips. It's supposed to keep the driver busy during the lulls. Their primary objective is to fulfill taxi jobs.
It's really a vicious cycle because obviously they want our acceptance rate to go up. Right now, like yesterday, we were at 4.1% acceptance rate, which is horrible. But the drivers don't want to take the calls because they're just not profitable. So the drivers who are doing well, like Ethan just said, they're kind of filling it in when it's a little bit slower out there and it's working. I've tried everything. I built a little fleet that's all they can do is Uber rides, and we guarantee them so much per shift. It's
Doesn't change
Doesn't
anything.
change.
Well, the pricing difference, the acceptance rate, I think, is a function of Uber's decision on pricing.
I mean, our feeling is we're again the lowest of the low. I was talking to Rich Frakes from Desert before the meeting. He's been out to South Point a few times. Hailing an Uber. He's a 5-star rated Uber customer. Not one of those cabs picked him up. It's going to other people. So it seems like, we don't know this for sure, but it seems like we are getting the worst.
Oh.
The lower rated customers.
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Well, no, but I have a comment. I mean, this is one of the criticisms of the TNCs in the first place, is that no one really knows how their algorithm works.
Right.
And they claim it's a mystery, but the reality is they seem to know, to be able to strategically, manipulate it to their benefit. So I hope they make it worthwhile for the taxi industry. They're gonna price you guys out of being interested altogether.
I mean, I'd suggest that, if any other business said, if you had a supermarket and a third-party app could increase your gross revenue, say by 3 or 4%, you would do business with them. So, I mean, that's how I look at it.
Unless you're getting spoiled milk all the time.
If you just make
Well,
it
you-
3% growth, I'd take it. We'll sell the spoiled milk to something. There's got to be use for spoiled milk somewhere.
Chairman, I just want to say, I believe that the program's working. We are getting more rides than we would have had. And to Athens' point, we're still pretty much in the infancy of this. I think we need to give it some time to grow. You can see when I get to my stats, we were over 1.2 million rides this month. That's an increase over last year. So maybe it's not going as quick as I would like to see it, but I still think we're trending in the right direction. So that's a comment I have to make.
And Chair, I have a question for the administrator. Is the practice going to be legal in the next year or two?
I hope so.
I think
Is the what?
practice,
This,
this business model.
Okay.
If it's going to be legal, then it's irrelevant as to it's market
Sure.
forces will determine whether the taxi companies want to use it or not.
Sure.
It's a different story if we're sending the agency down a long road to make this legal for something that may or may not be useful to industry.
And I fully agree with you, Member Decker. I'm not the legislature. I don't get to make all the decisions. We can certainly bring things to them, and I would hope that they would see the benefit of this. I can't see into the future, but I also would hate to see this opportunity slip through our fingers and stop.
And so with those comments, let me clarify. My question was not, do you think the legislature will vote one way or another? But my question is more towards, is the agency pursuing specifically the steps that it would take to make this?
I would say there's a couple of different avenues that are going on right now.
Okay.
We're still on that same path that we talked about before about a BDR or something along those.
Correct.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to get a little clarity from Board Member Decker in terms of when you say, will it be legal? Just my own education and understanding of what does that mean? What would make it not, what would make it illegal?
Well, I don't remember the NAC thing, but the board is mandated in law to set rates. And this is delegating that authority to the TNCs, who in this case would be setting rates. So the law doesn't technically allow us to do that, but that's kind of effectively what's going on when TNC sets the rate, charges the customer, and decides what to pay the taxi driver.
So there's a nuance there. I don't know if we're delegating it to the TNCs, but we certainly are in the draft rule that we'll be talking about this afternoon or later this morning, deferring to our sister agency for the way in which they have approved. So I just,
Technical clarification. I
yeah,
get it.
well, and I get that there may be legitimate concerns about how that process, not because I'm not casting aspersions on the sister agency, just it did it in a very different way. So that may, it's a different way than we set rates. So I could be criticism of that, but it's not that we're ignoring the rate making functions, that we're doing it a deferral to an but it is not wholly weird for one agency to defer to pricing mechanism from another agency.
So with what the administrator's asking for in terms of more time, which I can support him on that, because again, I think that we knew we were throwing something out there and hoping that it'd stick. How would he know if in fact, would he be notified that the road that we're traveling down now it's no longer legal, or how does that work if we are to get behind our administrator and say, we support his recommendation here today?
So I'll take this first swing at where I think we are process wise. The pilots have a shelf life under the current order till September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
October 31.
September 31st.
October 31.
Oh, October 31. Oh, that's right. So October 31.
Mhm.
Thank you. We have a draft regulation to replace that pilot order. It's temporary. So it's within our power to put it into place. So in my conception, typically the pilot order theoretically goes away in October and a temporary regulation steps in. That temporary regulation continues on until either the legislature says, oh, this is how we want it done, or says, we don't want you to do it. They say the latter, the temporary regulation will expire after they leave after the session. And LCB won't let us put another regulation in place if the regulation would be impermissible. If the legislature passes a statute, our regulation will be irrelevant. because the statute will take over. There may be new rule. So that's kind of where I think process wise we are at, if that helps. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Takes us to agenda item 6. This is the public hearing continued on the Pettiglow LLC acquisition of Nellis. Is it deep? It's a second.
The PPM.
Oh, yes, thank you. PPM. And this is back on before us because we're getting dangerously close to a bankruptcy court judge making a decision, as I read in the transcript last night. So lay of the land before, well, go ahead and take appearances.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Nevada Taxicab Authority Board, Administrator Park, Ms. Webb. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton, the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of Peaklow. Joining me today is my co-counsel and bankruptcy attorney for Peaklow, Mr. Jeff Hall. He's joining us via Teams. And with me here in the hearing room is the management team for Peaklow, Mr. John Hickman to my left, and Mr. Rich Franks and Ms. Cheryl Gibbons, here to answer any questions that you may have relative to operations going forward.
Correct me if I'm misunderstanding the record before the bankruptcy court, Christian. Pettiglow has been certified as the winning bidder. Z-Trip is a backup bidder, because that's in case Pettiglow can't perform in some way. Pettiglow won by paying or promising to pay more money. And at 1:30 this afternoon, bankruptcy court will have a hearing in which it's supposed to confirm the award, I guess is what I could say.
Yes, sir.
There was a comment period or a protest period, and there was, to my reading of the transcript, opposition to the court going forward. There was an attempt to try to stop bidding process. But that failed in the bankruptcy court, and bankruptcy court proceeded to do the. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And as the board is aware, we appeared before you in December with the original presentation of the sale and transfer application. There was a lengthy discussion. I think it was my understanding that the board did find that the application did comport with the statutory standards, and that Mr. Balaban, the owner operator of Peaklow, as a seasoned taxi operator here in Clark County, was certainly suitable to operate a new taxi cab company. However, as you noted, Chairman, there was a district court case that had been filed at that time, and therefore the matter was tabled. Immediately after that, the matter of Nellis Cab filed for bankruptcy protection. As you indicated, there was a live auction on the steps of the courthouse, and Peaklow was awarded the successful bidder. Thereafter, the transcript that you have in front of you confirms the fact that there had been a motion prior to the auction to challenge that, which was denied. Thereafter, the two qualified bidders, which were Peaklow and Z-Trip, were then allowed to bid for the assets of Nellis Cab. What we anticipate this afternoon at 1:30 is that the bankruptcy court will issue an order confirming the fact that Peaklow was the successful bidder and ordering the transfer of the Nellis assets to Peaklow.
Has the appeal, if there is an appeal time, the motion to test the bids, has it run, or would that be an interlocutory order that?
And at this point, I would defer to Mr. Hall. I think that the appeal time has run, but he is clearly our expert, if that's acceptable to you, Chair.
Mr. Hall, that'd be helpful just in us crafting an order, understanding if there's some major procedural contingency
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, again, I'm Jeff Hall. I represent Piccolo in the Nellis Cab bankruptcy matter. What is on for hearing this afternoon is a motion to approve that sale, that auction process that happened on May 5th, where Piccolo was the high bidder. No opposition has been filed to the debtor's motion to approve that sale. And so we anticipate that sale. I mean, the bankruptcy court without an opposition is certainly just going to grant that motion. Since there has been no opposition, there's really there's nothing to appeal from. So if somebody wanted to appeal from that order, which we anticipate coming in, there simply wouldn't be anything to appeal from because nobody objected to it in the first place. With respect to the motion or the opposition and how this worked was Piccolo was designated of what we call stalking horse bidder ahead of the bankruptcy auction. That was challenged as you recited. That was challenged in the bankruptcy court, and that challenge was denied. The appeal period for that has run because an order has been entered. I mean, the appeal period from a bankruptcy order, I believe, is 30 days. I'll have to double check that. It might be 20, but at this point, there hasn't been any sort of notice of appeal filed with respect to that. So as we see the record, as I see the record, there's really no opportunity to appeal anything at this point. Based on the time running on the denial of the objection to the stalking horse designation, and then the fact that no objection has been filed to the motion to approve the sale to Piccolo.
For either you, Ms. Russian, or counsel bankruptcy, is there a anticipated time period for the cutover? I mean, that the court enters an order today or shortly after today, confirming it, and the transaction will close within 30 days? Is it the transaction must close within 6 months? I mean, is there what kind of time period, if anybody knows?
Jeff, would you like me to respond to that or?
Sure. I can jump in or you can. It's fine.
Sir, go ahead.
So the asset purchase agreement has a trigger of the sales order being entered. Once the bankruptcy court enters the sales order, the asset purchase agreement contemplates a closing within 10 days. Now, in candor, that can be changed based on the agreement of the parties, the debtor and the purchaser. But I can tell you from Piccolo's perspective, once that sale order is entered, we're going to move with, all appropriate diligence to close that transaction sooner than later. And so that's the timeline we're looking at. We'd like to get it done within that 10 days that's called for in the asset purchase agreement.
Administrator, what, if any, oversight do you feel you need of the transfer from one company to another? You need something more than that 10 days. You can do it on 2 days. You do it after the fact. What's the, what, if anything, do we need to build in for your administrative oversight of the transfer?
I think within a couple of days, we should be able to take care of it.
Within that 10 days.
Yeah.
And Chairman, if I could speak further to that.
Sure.
The transaction is contemplated to be closed in 10 days. And what we expect to happen in that period is notification will go to Nellis and its employees about the transaction of the bankruptcy court order. And then at that time, the management team had already prepared, because as you'll recall, this was a transaction that was somewhat already contemplated and completed by the time we appear before you in December. So the objective is to certainly close the transaction at that time, but we'll use that period in addition to any extra time that is needed to actually transfer the operations. And again, the staff can speak to that and tell you how easy it is. But I think what's critical for your edification is is going to happen with the employees. As soon as the bankruptcy court order is issued, those employees will be notified that they have positions available if they're interested at Desert Cab in Virgin Valley. And then when Nellis becomes operational under Piclo, they'll have the option to work for them. The objective is to ensure that there's not a gap in service for those drivers. So the 10-day notice or the court order, once we get that, will complete the APA. That I would recommend as a compliance item in addition to the bankruptcy court order. And then the standard operational inspections, demonstration of proof of insurance, the inspection of the vehicles, all the proper markings, things such as that. But we don't.
Inventory of the medallions.
Yes, sir. But otherwise, everything should be maintained as the same. They're maintaining the name, the color scheme, and everything so that the outward facing company still appears to be Nellis.
And I take it that the PSA would allow you to accelerate that 10 days as well as to extend it.
I believe so, Mr. Hall, that it's to close within 10 days, but it doesn't have any significance if it's closed beforehand or afterwards. I don't believe there's a clause or anything that.
And I only raise that because if the administrator needs a couple days, I don't want you escalating it without him having.
Chair, in my opinion, in dealing with a lot of these matters, the underlying transaction is really the completion of the bankruptcy proceeding and the transmission of the money. And then at that point, once that's been completed, we dovetail that with respect to the changeover of the operation. So it's somewhat seamless, but if there's a gap or two, really, I don't think it would otherwise negatively impact the transaction, because that to me is just the securing the APA, having that signed, the bankruptcy order, and then thereafter the submission of the money.
So I want to make sure I understand correctly what you're saying. 10 days is closing of the transaction, where there's actually a transfer of ownership and money's paid. But the actual transition would occur after that
That is correct.
by some number of days.
And Mr. Hall, I don't believe that there's anything in the APA that would otherwise prohibit them.
Yeah, that's correct. And again, we can close any time within the 10 days. The APA contemplates it closing within 10 days of the sales order. And again, reserving the right from the parties to extend that if necessary for some reason. And obviously, I can't really speak to that. I do litigation and bankruptcy. I don't do, I'm not aware of all the nuts and bolts of a purchase of a taxi cab company, but obviously, from our perspective, we would like to move with all due diligence to get the transaction completed as soon as we can.
Good questions? No. Do you have any questions?
Just talk about the 10 days. That's the first thing that came to my mind. I think I heard it answered, but I was wondering, where did that 10 days come from? But then you kept using the word, what word did you use? Contemplating.
Yes, sir.
And in contemplating a number of the different things that could happen, if in fact, I know that the administrator indicated that it would take him a couple of days within that 10-day window, what happens if in fact it goes a little bit beyond that? Is there flexibility in that would extend him a couple of days? Or could that be a condition that offers that type of cushion for him so that there are no penalties or it throws things off? Because as we've been listening to this situation for the last several months, there's been a lot of changes and things come up at the 11th hour that we've had to pivot. So I'm just wondering, in this case here, is that something that we've contemplated?
So in response to your question, Dr. Weekly, in the original asset purchase agreement, and it's in all of them, there's a date in which the transaction is determined to be completed. And there are factors for that. This one was modified pursuant to the bankruptcy case matter. I mean, it's required. And therefore, once the bankruptcy court order is entered this afternoon, then the fully executed purchase agreement will go into place. But it's no different than any other one that you see before you. It's just unique because of the bankruptcy factor. But what any transaction of this nature contemplates is that the parties have met all of those specific terms under the asset purchase agreement. In this instance, it was the completion of the bankruptcy matter and the payment of the money. That needs to be done within the 10 days. It's not mandatory, as Mr. Hall has indicated, but that is what is contemplated under the asset purchase agreement. That does not in any way conflict with the ability to start transferring over the operations. Whether that closes or not, it's not going to change anything. And so what we contemplate is that the money will go hard. That's always one of your compliance requirements, is that the underlying transaction be completed and that the parties confirm that the money has been paid. And then thereafter, there are the other operational things. So those run simultaneous with one another. And I would respectfully submit that the 10 days, if the matter closes in there, only will work toward benefit of ensuring that Nellis gets up and operational again very soon. So I do not believe that if anything changes with the 10 days, whether or not they close, it will impact the ability of the TA to proceed with the normal compliance items.
Okay, I appreciate that, Ms. Rushton, because you've been amazing in terms of presenting these facts to us and making sure that we're abreast of it. I just want to make sure that Ms. Webb and our administrator are covered, that if in fact they have to pivot and make any other changes that fall in their lap, or it gives the appearance that they held up the process.
Yes, sir. And by its normal course, what generally happens is if this body issues a final approval today, then we go into a compliance period. So the actual transfer of the license, the taxi license, does not occur until Administrative Park is satisfied that all of the compliance items have been met.
Sure.
So we'll have the bankruptcy order this afternoon, the fully executed APA, and then the general operational standards.
Thank you
And
so
then
much.
once those have been satisfied, he'll let you know, and then hopefully that will trigger the transfer of the license, excuse me.
So are there any due diligence items that are still open?
Those are not to my knowledge.
It's okay. So those are all closed.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Go.
No, go.
Favor done.
No, I was gonna say, you consider that the applicant has met the requirements that the board placed on it in December through the bidding process.
Yes, sir.
I think we're through that.
Does the bankruptcy have to do anything during the 10-day pendency? So once they issue their order, they're done. Or is there anything else that the bankruptcy court has to do? Like sign off on the transfer or something like that? Do we have to get a trustee's signature or anything like that? I don't know if that's you or Mr. Hall.
Mr. Hall.
Yeah, appreciate that question. No, from our perspective, once the court enters that sales order, then the court really is going to leave it to the parties, and that does include the debtor, to effectuate the closing of the transaction. And so certainly we're going to be working with counsel for the debtor to ensure, to close the transaction as contemplated. But we don't need any other approvals or sign-offs from the bankruptcy court to make that happen.
What, if any, local business, state business licenses would have to be?
So
Or is it they're somehow able to use the ones they've got?
yes, sir, in response to your question, PICLO has already obtained a state business license and obviously filed its articles of incorporation. We have because of the fact that the registrations on the vehicle will not change, we're not required to come in and have those re-registered until that expires. I've also contacted the airport, advised them of the transaction. Again, as long as the registrations aren't changed, we'll just need to change the address. And then PICLO will need to pay for the new ABIs. The only municipal license that we're working on right now, Chair, is the business license. And we can't obtain that until we have approval from the TA. And then after that, we'll obtain the 3% excise tax from it.
Any other question? So my comments back to the board, and I will ask Mr. Hall and Ms. Rushton to weigh in. Well, first of all, do any of the board members have questions of the folks that are going to operate? They're the usual suspects. So
No.
question. I guess I've been called worse.
Didn't say inmates.
Here.
So from my standpoint, I would see three compliance conditions. I would think that we should approve find Pedigo and its principles fit, willing, and able. That transfer is therefore approved, conditioned on one, delivery to the administrator of an complete and accurate copy of the bankruptcy court approval. I wouldn't have that delivery trigger this, we can debate this, a 5-day period during which the acquirer, the applicant, would submit to the administrator. I'm going to use a term, some inside baseball, so as Rushton understands, changeover plan that articulates how you're going to go through each of the processes of inventorying the medallions, cars, employees, FF&E, whatever, how that, you know, using the kind of model by analogy, what gaming would require. And if 5 days, I think that's not reasonable. I think you probably are 90% of the way. But at least that gives the administrator comfort that you've categorized everything. And if he thinks something's missing, changeover plan, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, how are you handling X?
Sure.
That you, administrator, would approve that changeover plan within 5 days. So that's the same 10 days that the closing is going to occur. I agree with you. You confirmed, both you and Mr. Hall confirmed for me, the 10 days really has nothing to do with the mechanic, the regulatory mechanics. That's the transactional mechanics. But I agree with you also, we can use that 10 days to be in place so that you can be prepared to go. And then delivery, the third condition would be delivery of a notice jointly signed by buyer and seller that they deem the transaction to close.
And a copy of the fully executed.
Yeah, that would include the fully executed. And the reason I do that is in the regulatory contexts, we've all seen, whether it's gaming, cannabis, or a bank or whatever, one party says, oh yeah, we closed, and the other party says, no, we didn't close, they didn't deliver X. So we want both parties to say, to have a kumbaya moment, say, but and that would be the third condition, at which time you will have already approved the changeover plan so they can run with it, and you can come in and do whatever post changeover audit you want. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Is that your motion?
Yeah, so you want to make a motion to do what Dan just said.
Sure, thank you. Then-
But before you do, let's see if council thinks there's something I've missed.
No, sir. Consistent with what we've talked about today, I'll put together the 5-day plan with respect to the operational changeover. I neglected to note the fact that we also need to demonstrate proof of insurance. And so
Yeah.
those factors will all go into that, and I'll submit that to the administrator later today or first thing tomorrow.
Any chips you counted? Yeah.
Well, I can tell you,
The felts are all good, and yeah, meter readings and all that.
When I contacted Rich and Cheryl yesterday, they said, Kim, we've been ready to go since December. We've got everything ready. So I really appreciate the timeliness of this as we all prepare.
So I didn't see the assets that are attached includes the safes and all cash handling, blah, 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 blah. Do we need to worry about a bucket or anything like that in terms of this amount, that amount?
No, sir.
Okay,
No,
I'll leave that to you. Would you like me to?
yeah, if you want
I-
to take a swing at it.
All right, I move to find the applicant fit, willing, and able, and to approve the transfer conditioned on the 3.5 items that were outlined by the chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
He's got a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Does the administrator have any other thoughts?
No, sir, I think that's
Good. Need counsel for the gavel goes down. Good.
No, sir, but I would be remiss if I didn't take the time and the opportunity to thank both Ms. Webb and Administrator Park, primarily because of the fact that we were very sensitive about the drivers not having a gap. And they have agreed to work with us on that. And again, I think that demonstrates the effectiveness of this agency in times when they're lean. So they really do work with the industry to make these matters that, not only flow smoothly for the operators, but also for those drivers that we care so much about. So thank you.
And so, Mr. Hall, I know this isn't your forum, but kind of like bankruptcy court, going, gone. Do you have anything?
No, nothing further to add. Appreciate the time and being able to let me participate.
There are no further items to discuss. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? None.
Thank you.
It dawned on me as John going through that, related to you, I failed to note at the beginning of the meeting that member Vasquez not with us, but he had an excused absence. I apologize. Okay. That takes us to agenda item number 7. This is on our agenda. I don't see Mr. Balaban. I don't know if there's in his absence it's going to address this matter. This is a item that we received a inquiry from Desert Cab as to whether we would consider creating a new class of medallions that would be used for zero emission vehicles. And this air tool making. So we've placed that on the agenda so that we can hear what the ask is, because it was kind of cryptic as to what was to be achieved. So this is a discussion item only, taking action today because we didn't know quite.
Action was being requested.
Yeah, correct. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Nevada Taxicab Authority Board, Administrator Park, and Ms. Webb. The record, I'm Kimberly Maxton Rushton with law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of Desert Cab and Virgin Valley. The matter that's on before your consideration today is noted as a discussion item. Specifically, Mr. Balaban inquired about whether or not there was an interest in possibly doing a medallion allocation specific to zero emission vehicles. Historically, there have been special categories of medallions specific to geographic areas, time areas, and then of course the handicap medallions. And so in an interest to, one, become more competitive, and two, look at the community at large and the investment into a zero emissions vehicle, there was a discussion about possibly, again, expanding the medallions to include that. Before we get into the regulatory discussion, Chair, I thought it would be helpful to ask both Cheryl Gibbons and Rich Frakes to give you some historical background. Cheryl can speak to the fact of how previously the TA addressed these special medallion requests, and then Rich can give you some further understanding about the value of using the zero emissions and what the company is kind of contemplating in that regard.
Good morning, members of the board, staff, Cheryl Gibbons on behalf of Desert Cab and Virgin Valley Cab. Historically, the Taxicab Authority Board and staff had determined that the needs of the public required different types of medallions. Medallions that would serve specific times of the day where there was a shortage of allocations on the road to service the public, and allocations to service certain areas of town who were being underserved. So there were many types of workshops, and then it had been determined that based on the current statute, the TA board had the ability to attach conditions to medallion allocations. So I believe the first one was the actual wheelchair equipped medallions. There were two different types of allocations. The first allocation was a medallion that had to be equipped on a wheelchair accessible vehicle. The second type of allocation pursuant to that was an allocation that this medallion had to be on a vehicle that could serve two wheelchair vehicles or two wheelchairs at the same time. That later on had changed, but the board did not feel that they needed to actually make an NAC or ask the legislature for help on this because you have the ability to attach conditions to medallion allocations. Then subsequently, we had time restricted medallions based on day of week. We had time restricted medallions based on time of day, and south of sunset medallions that could only operate outside of the Golden Triangle. So the precedent has been set by board order to allow these types of conditions to be attached to medallions. And we believe that it's time to take that one more step and look at something that is going to be emission-free, trying to go green, which Desert has already done. There are more than 30 such vehicles in our fleet right now between Virgin and Desert. And to see if there was an appetite amongst the board, staff, and the industry to have these discussions to see the next step in the evolution of the types of medallions that we'll be allocating to serve the public.
Right. Rich Friggs for Desert Cab Virgin Valley. So we've made the investment for those zero emission cars. I mean, they're more expensive than a regular car, considerably more. But we made that investment. We've also made the investment to make the charging stations at the cab company. We have 25 level 2 chargers, and we have 4 level 3 chargers to make them, the fast chargers. So we've made that investment already. We have plans to expand that. But in addition, the drivers like driving them because right now gas prices are expensive. We let them charge for free at the cab company, but they can charge outside at different charging stations around the city if they want to. But we look at it as an opportunity to, number one, serve the public with a green emission car if they want them. Even Uber and Lyft have a extra charge if you want a green car, right? If you want to drive in a Tesla, they charge you extra for that. Not that we would want to charge extra, we just want to make that investment to have them available for the public to ride in the cars. So we believe that there's a place for those, and the industry would be able to support that through driving the green cars. My drivers actually like driving them. They're a little bit, I want to say, a novelty because there's a lot more gadgets and stuff in there that's compared to just a regular gas car or ICE car, whatever you want to call it. So we've been running them since 2022. And I think that they're pretty reliable cars on the other side of that. So.
Chair and members of the board, I can certainly continue to articulate the multiple aspects of the zero emission cars and how that benefits the community relative to pollution, less gas for the taxi industry itself. But also what's interesting is that this initially arose because there were calls at the airport were asking if there were any zero emission taxis, electric vehicles, or anything that didn't use gas. Foreigners or people from other countries oftentimes do look for those things. And so when the initial call came from the airport, Mr. Balaban and I discussed this. We tried to see if there was a way that we could pony up and get in front of the taxi line if we had that kind of special vehicle. But, again, the thought has been there because of the fact that it started with an initial request. And so we present to you today the interest in using zero emission vehicles. And if, again, we would contemplate doing so pursuant to an application process. But if you feel that it would be more effective or clear to the industry to have a regulation, we can certainly work in that regard.
Chair, I have some question.
Pardon?
I have some questions.
Sure. Fire away.
I was thoroughly confused as to what your request was until you mentioned priority queuing, and then it begins to dawn on me a little bit why you would want a Lev or Zev medallion. Because currently, you've got, do you have any extra medallions that you don't use?
Yeah.
No. Okay. Do you need more medallions?
Yes.
Okay. So why, I can't understand why you would want to limit medallions to zero emissions vehicles when you can currently use whatever type of vehicle you want under existing medallions. So, but when you mention priority queuing, well, then I get a little bit, then it makes a little bit more sense, because if you've got 100 medallions and you could pick whatever kind of car you want to operate, zero, low emission, gas, whatever it is, it doesn't make sense to me that you want the board to regulate specifically, hey, we can only use 25 have to be zero, 25 has to be Lev, and then the rest can be gas, when you currently could use whatever you want out of the 100. Then you mentioned priority queuing, and I think, okay, maybe there's some kind of other reason that you would want the board to limit what currently has no limitations for you. And what I would say to that is, it wouldn't be how venues queue your cabs. This would be an unintended effect of this specifically limited medallion that I don't think the board, or at least myself, would want to get into. If you have a Lev Zev vehicle and the venue would like to give you priority queuing, you don't need a specific medallion for them to recognize that it's a Toyota Prius or whatever it is. So the board has gotten away from the time and geographic limitations on medallions. You don't currently have low emission vehicle medallions, but you're using those. So I'm not exactly sure what the benefit would be to the company, to the public, to the venue, to the board by going in and limiting your medallions to one specific type of vehicle when you can currently use whatever vehicle you want.
Well, I want to follow up before you answer that. I want to follow up. So I had the same question. Are you contemplating that would be a different fee associated with this type of medallion? Would it have different terms other than it has to be on EV? And if there's actually a need for more medallions, is it just, do we need to create, I think it's the same issue that you're raising, do we need to create a special purpose and
Or just have them.
or just have the industry say, hey, we need more medallions for disabilities. And to your point, Cheryl, I just going to say I respectfully disagree. The statute appears to me from the legislative history that the legislature thought that the system of medallions would be done by rulemaking. The LCD actually wrote in the title of the statute adoption of a regulatory system for the issuance of medallions. So I'm a bit uncomfortable that we would do this by law, but we're not skittish about adopting regulations. See that in another 25 minutes.
But I would have to be clear on why we would want to do that, why industry would.
I agree, but I just say process wise, I would want to rule.
Historically, not necessarily this board, but prior boards have used the chair's point of phrase skittish about issuing allocation. Allocation was something that the industry would fight tooth and nail to try to receive from the board. And when allocation was granted, it was usually granted on a very limited piecemeal basis. Bringing this forward, I believe Mr. Balaban, who can speak so well for himself, I hope I'm not challenged on this later on, I believe George's thinking was, look, it would be one thing for us to just come in and say, Desert and Virgin Valley are using all of their medallions, we need an allocation. When possibly not every carrier can say that. By bringing forth a new idea, which would be a totally emission-free type of medallion, similar to the wheelchair vehicles that we have now. It's a new idea, it's innovative, and it forces the industry to take a look at what we're actually putting on the road. If you want to put an internal combustion engine vehicle on the road, then you go before the authority and ask for a regular allocation. But if you're willing to put forth the financial investment to purchase an EV car, then yes, you want to share in this allocation that can only go on an EV car, great. Not that it is going to give us special queuing at hotels or at the airport, but it is a significantly higher investment. And just like the wheelchair equipped vehicles. So as such, we believe if the industry wants to do this, put forth the bucks, get this type of medallion. If you want just to buy a regular, Toyota and put it on the road, then let's come forward and put forth an application for those types of medallions. But we also believed, Mr. Chairman, that this could be done by board order versus regulation based on the history of the type of allocations that we received.
So in essence, it's meant to incentivize the industry to go with zero emissions by creating the special category. And relative to the statutory language, Chair, I would say that really that statute, that language orders the TA to develop an allocation system by regulation. Now, if we need to amend our regulation to call out the ability to do special medallions, we could certainly do that. But I think, again, as Mr. Decker said, we can come in and ask for an allocation, but we would like to ask for it to be specific to zero emissions in an effort, like I said, to encourage the industry and also to meet what is somewhat of a demand right now for those type of vehicles on the road.
Yeah. So my question is, we're at a fuel surcharge period right now, right?
Mhm.
Do we charge the taxi cabs that are being used that are zero emissions, Teslas and whatnot? Do they still get a the surcharge?
Yes, they still charge whatever's the metered rate.
Right.
There's no difference in
Because
that,
it's in
but
the
we
meter.
still have to pay for electricity. Electricity is more expensive now than it was 6 or 8 months ago too, right? I mean, it's relative to, natural gas prices. So I don't know if you guys looked at your power bill. We do. Our power bill went up like 25% last year. So it's significantly more than just paying for fuel.
Okay.
There's a cost associated with that.
And remember, Ralph, that could always be,
Fire power plant as opposed to gasoline.
and those factors could either be in a board order relative to an allocation, or it could be in the reg that emission-free vehicles, or that their meters cannot charge the fuel surcharge for that reason. I mean, so those are things that we can certainly work towards, that if you believe there's a benefit to the public, because that's the objective.
I would say, I think it's a cool idea for the administrator to discuss with industry and maybe present some kind of proposal. But I also am a little bit concerned that Mr. Balaban needs medallions and doesn't want to just come ask for them, and that this is a way to wedge in a request without without offending the board or the agency or something. I would say that any agency that needs medallions that can show that they need them should feel free to request those from the agency or the board. This doesn't necessarily encourage companies to go green. It encourages them to grow green, right? Because they have the same number of existing medallions. And what you're saying is if you want any more than that, they'll be zero emission. So we're not converting any existing ones, correct? That's not your proposal?
Correct.
Right.
It would be an additional allocation, but by the same token, any company can come before this board and ask for an allocation of standard medallions as well.
Right. Sure.
But to that point, Decker, I'm enamored with the thought of not having to, well, not enamored. I am, since fact that not all certificate holders may need a general increase in medallions. And that if we open that up, then there is this debate about, well, does one carrier get more general medallions to use for the EV vehicles, but other ones don't because they can't use them.
Right.
And I'm still old-fashioned enough to believe that there's some perceived value in the economic value of those medallions on folks' account. So opening up general medallions. Tell you that when I had the conversation with Mr. Belvin, I said, I'm not enamored of opening a general medallion. I don't mean that in a negative sense, that there's going to be all kinds of different positions on it. So, I see the thought process here, but I still didn't get. I'm going to say I did get an answer because nobody said anything, so I'm going to give you a chance. You're not talking about a different fee structure. You're not talking about some other special rights associated with this other than it would be on an EV bill.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, NRS 706-884 provides that we as the board or the administration need to undertake an annual analysis or review of the existing allocation of the number of medallions. When's the last time I know we're in the process of implementing, and I think this board has said that's A. B is the rates and fees and everything else, same annual review. So when's the last time, Administrator Park, that we've gone through and done an analysis of the number of medallions and whether or not there's a need for these other medallions?
Well, every month we look at the allocation of medallions and what companies have how many. I have been in this position almost 3 years now, and the amount of medallions overall has not increased or decreased in 3 years.
No, I know it's 3503. So I can say it. I know it. Right? I'm not looking back, and so the record's clear. I didn't have to look at anything. I know the numbers, but that's my point. Is this a request that we perform that type of analysis regarding the allocation of existing medallions and or the addition of new medallions?
I think it would be a good thing, yeah.
Do we know how to go about doing that? Like, what would be the factors and information that we would consider in making that type of analysis?
I'm going to ask my deputy to come up. He's got a lot more experience with this than I do.
Rich Frakes, Desert Cab. Can I just add something real quick? So since we started leasing cars over the last several years, right? So there's a different dynamic in the way that cars are put on the road. So before we leased the cabs, you had a day and a shift and a night shift. So you're basically double shifting the car. So these cars would go out, it would double shift the cars. Now, as you're leasing them, you can see the numbers are going up, right? The lease numbers are going up, but those are just one person's driving the car. So they drive the car for 12 hours and then that's it. Then there's no other person driving the car. So you're not double shifting the car. So in essence, we need double the cars, because if you looked at the numbers, I think I looked at the numbers, 56% of the cars on the road are leased, right? 50%, 56% of the trips are lease trips. So out of those trips, that's only one person driving the car. So you can for one shift. So in essence, we need double the medallions to have that same effect, right? So if we wanted to have the industry be whole like it was, you need to double shift all the cars. Well, if you're only leasing one person, because that's how people want to lease the car, then you'd really need double the medallions. We have an employee model that double shift the cars. I have a lease model that double shifts the cars, but not all of my leases are double shifted. I'm going to say a very, I'm going to pick a number, 40% are double, right? That's just because two guys want to work together. That has nothing to do with the other guys, right? So I can't speak for the rest of the industry. I can just speak for myself that those leases are well sought after. People come to me because I just want my car by myself. I want my car by myself. So we try to do that, but I have no more medallions to lease the car to themselves.
Sorry, let me just say, I get this, and this is an interesting byproduct of the whole lease type of operation that we haven't heard before. I haven't heard before, and I think we should consider that and address that as it relates to the lease program, which is relatively new in the history of the taxi industry. But it's a very separate problem from the LevZev medallions that you initially proposed. So this kind of confirms my worry that industry needs more medallions and they're thinking up a scheme to get them out of the board, when what I would really prefer is that you work with the administrator, say, this is what's going on and this is what we need, and bring it to us directly so that we can consider the actual factors that exist in the marketplace, as opposed to, hey, if we go LevZev, will you give us more medallions? Well, do you need more medallions? And tell us why, and we can address that specifically, as well as the LevZev program. But those are two different things.
And Member Decker, that was the objective. We needed direction. I mean, and again, understanding that you can't pre-approve or give us your thoughts relative to whether or not this would be something that would be approved, but we wanted to know the mechanism to get this in front of you. Would it be better if we approach this by amending one of the regulations, or could we put in an application asking for additional medallions specific to electric vehicles or zero emission vehicles? And would that be entertained? And so in the NTA scheme, there's a market standard, and it's demonstrated it's necessary because it substantiates the financial solvency of the operations and the ability to meet the 20%. That is somewhat similar here. What we're saying is that we need additional medallions specifically to be able to accommodate or to grow green, as you said. And so for those reasons, we wanted to put in an application. If the board doesn't want it that specific and would prefer that we just come in and ask for additional vehicles, and the opinion is that it doesn't matter if it's a diesel vehicle or emissions free, we're going to look at them all the same. Then that was the direction that we were seeking. And I will tell you, this is a challenge because no one disputes the fact that a vehicle is a vehicle is a vehicle. But the NTA doesn't agree with that, because a vehicle that is approved by the DMV to operate as an autonomous vehicle is just one that's operated on the road. But for some reason, they get a whole statutory scheme to themselves and get the authority to operate, even though it's just a vehicle. So it doesn't matter if that vehicle is doing taxi service or limo service or scenic tour. That's the service, and they should be held to that, because DMV's job is to approve whether or not that vehicle goes on the road. I mean, we've got these inconsistencies, and what we're trying to say is that we agree that it's the vehicle and it's the type of service. But in this instance, the interest is to really grow green and to move forward with zero emissions.
Which is, well, okay, but that's a separate issue from, we also need more medallions in general operations. Got this green program, that's great. We also need more medallions.
And I think both of those factors demonstrate to the board why there's a need possibly for additional medallions. So those are just, again, more factors for your consideration. I think give you the level of comfort that you could consider an application for a medallion expansion and move forward.
Gotcha, but I don't want to gloss over the outcome of the lease program, because that is not something that we contemplated when I think I was the administrator when we first signed all of those. If I remember right, I don't know, 2018 or something, but that was not something that we foresaw. And if that is now years later, something that you're experiencing, I also want to address that on its own, because that's not an anticipated outcome that we thought would impact the cabs on the road is that, hey, these used to be used 24 hours. Now they're only being used for 12 hours. 40% of our fleet is not on the road half the time. That's a big deal in itself that I think we need to address. So.
I'm not sure where the
I
question.
think, I think Administrator Park had invited you to speak on some issues and we,
He somehow thought you had something to say.
yeah.
No, I have been around the agency at a time when we did used to have a real tight hold on all the medallions, as Cheryl had spoke of. There were a lot. There were every month. It was deeply looked at, and they looked at what the blown shifts was a huge number because every medallion had 2 shifts to use, and that number was something that was always watched. When in 2015, when they released and went countywide on all the medallions except for the only restriction is the handicap medallions, we stopped watching. You know, we allocated an extra 30 medallions to every company, and then we stopped watching so closely on that. That was when Uber and Lyft came into town. We said, board said at that time, go forth and try to conquer. Here's extra medallions. And we'll let you guys mandate and regulate yourself on how many medallions you need out there. Blown shifts became much more prevalent, but we don't watch it. It isn't something that we do. In order to analyze that, that would be something we'd have to dig back into. We have to look at all their trip sheets, all their shifts, how many shifts they're running, how many are blown shifts, how many medallions are actually out on the road. Start paying closer attention to that. It would be a deep dive, and it would take at least one management analyst to really dig into it. So it can be done. It has been done in the past. And it is something that we could look into. There was also historically on green energy in about 2010 or 12, not sure where it came down to, but maybe Cheryl remembers, but they did the hybrid incentive. We used to give 67 months for life of a vehicle, and that has since changed to 10 model years, but we only used to give 67 months to use a cab. They gave an initiative to get people to switch over to hybrid vehicles. They gave them an additional 2 years to run that vehicle as an incentive.
So I guess part of my questioning and or probing was to get to a point where, yeah, file a petition, you know, we're all, I think, open to the process. That's not the issue. The issue is what you would need to submit to support that sort of thing. So we can sit up here, Rich and Cheryl, we respect you guys and we know you guys have a lot of information and knowledge and that there's many years of operations sitting at the table on the other side of us. But it's the information that we need to be able to either do an order or change a rule to be able to do that. And we're all aware of other forces and other agencies that are taking place, and we have no problem addressing it with the application of and or to make you guys more competitive given that other stuff. So
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, but it's gonna be, I don't mean to cut you off. It's gonna be financial stuff. It's gonna be, you know, statistical information regarding countywide demand. And that's difficult to do. I'm gonna tell you that it's difficult to say. And this is a question that I would have. Just logically, is there's gotta be a demand and there's gotta be, you're filling that demand within this regulated industry, and that because of that, we've got to see information that warrants that sort of thing. So as opposed to us regulating it, as opposed to sister agencies a few minutes ago regulating it, I don't think anybody here is shy of stepping into the pool. We just want to make sure that we have the information and everything that we need to have to be able to base that type of, you know, decision.
I agree 100%. I want you guys to feel free to come to us and go, hey, we need more medallions and this is why. As opposed to, you know, coming up with something that we might, swallow easier or something. Like the Lev Zev thing. I think the Lev Zev thing is great. I can think of a couple issues with implementing it, related to existing Lev Zev and how fair is that for fleets that don't already have them. But, if you need medallions, I think we need to evaluate that on its face. I also would like to say, in that regard, I think the limitation of medallions, is less important today than it probably was in the past, considering that anybody who wants to can be an Uber driver, and Uber doesn't limit the number of drivers on the road in any way other than kind of, background check. The agency needs money. I think you buy the medallions. So I think the limitation on the number of medallions was important in past when they were limited geographically and by time and all that kind of stuff. Now we want to make sure there's enough cabs on the road. And if there are enough medallions on the road, in the hands of the companies, we need to know that.
And to your point, Member Graff, there are applications, especially AI applications, that'll take your statistics for the last 12 months and crunch them and spit out, really where the industry has been. And we can give you charts and drafts or graphs that really do demonstrate how the industry has been impacted by the entrance of the TNCs, the entrance of the AV vehicles, and then, of course, all of the other factors relative to the leasing. And I think that would be helpful in your consideration.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree. I prefer graphs.
With color. Um,
Yes, sir.
and I think you can proceed with an application, but I would encourage, I think what you're probably hearing is that you not limit it to the EV issue, but to broader look at it, because I'm not sure not trying to, this may come across as ignorant. I'm not sure there is the economic or the financial value that we used to attribute to a medallion. I know that it is dealt with that way, but I'm not sure for the reasons we're talking about. I'd encourage you to think out of the box. There may be a reason to have both a lease plate and a medallion on a car, or is there just a lease medallion? That you can pull off of that car and put on another car and make it the lease car. So, I just think there's a whole bunch of issues here that go to how the expense to you doing it and whether or not we've got a bunch of keg artificial. It's not New York where you buy the medallion, right? Or DC, that comes with the company. So I think there's issues we ought to be looking at.
Well, and to your point, Mr. Chairman, as it stands right now, we have to make a decision. Do we put that medallion on the vehicle as a fleet medallion or a lease medallion?
That's right.
So if it were, now you've got all of our wheels spinning as to, okay, well, yes, let's get some allocation and let's,
That's exactly what we're doing.
that's,
We are
yeah.
literally, I'm
flip it.
holding cars in. I have I'm literally operationally, on a Friday, I don't send out all my employee cars because I need X cars for the leases, because those guys are they've already paid for the lease to start.
Right.
And then the next day, it's like, we're doing the same thing. We do the same thing. So most of the time I pay somebody that's what they're doing. They're just doing the scheduling, back and forth.
Pretty sure George didn't intend to start this big of a
No,
snowball, but I think if we're gonna go into this area, we gotta do it more holistically and try to maybe modernize it. And I'm not trying to make more work for you, but I, as one member, am open to being told I don't have to go through rulemaking to an order, but but I also don't want to go down the order route and get told by somebody who sits over there usually, wait a minute, you can't do that, you got to remove.
Or to have interveners that object to it and then
Yeah,
take it
right.
out. That's right.
I just want to get that, this squared up.
Well,
Don't get too far.
and Chair, I sincerely thank you on behalf of Desert Cab and Virgin Valley for taking the time, one, putting this on the agenda and having this discussion. I think it's important. And I think it gave us the direction that we need to proceed. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Staff report.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be very brief. We've already heard that the rides were 1.2 million for the month.
And that we know how many medallions you have.
I'll skip over how many, let's see. Sure. I think member Graff reminded us what that was. I think Curtis brought up earlier, the employee revenue per trip was right around $20. It's $20.05. Police revenues and $20.68. We're on track today, this year, to have more rides than what we had last year. I'd like to see that trend. So I think we're trending in the right direction. Again, earlier comments about the pilot program, I think it is the direct result of that. I think with that, I'm gonna let the chief come up and give some of our agency stats for the month.
Morning, board.
Morning.
For May, down a little bit from April in all categories. About 2/3 of the citations written in May, or I'm sorry, we dropped a third from April. The PTs were a little bit less. Number of impounds were about a half as much as April, which, thinking EDC was here, I think the numbers would have gone up. We added 2 more officers with that big training, so that's actually, it's a temporary low in manpower, but should increase soon. And complaints we're about the same. Reckless driving is doubled. Citations, just concerning. Overall, we handled more calls from last month, from April to May. But we're pretty much on path. And as of yesterday, we have surpassed 2025 CPTs, and we're right in the middle of the year. So on path to double as many that we have done last year. And since I'm following that, I'd just like to, as a local, anything to improve air quality. I think that the board should entertain that as well, that electric cars do not pollute. So, and go USA.
Industry, just so you know, the chief just reported more reckless driving citations and more accidents. So, but I want to talk to drivers.
Just in finishing up, I'd like to just, I know we spoke briefly about the EDC numbers this year. Like the chief said, our impounds were down. I made the decision to have our taxi enforcement guys out at the taxi line out at EDC. They were not out trying to get the illegal drivers this year. I think we have discussed it, the chief and I, and we'll probably change our tactics a little bit for next year. I don't know if you are aware, but EDC will now be 2 weekends, back-to-back weekends with several events during the middle of the week. So Chief's already put out a memo that there will be no vacation time during those times. So we're going to look at our tactics and see what we can do. The last thing I want to bring up is the surcharge. The surcharge for EDC. We have seen a decline in rides from the first year. First year, brand new shiny thing. Drivers seem to be excited to go out. Last year they declined, and then this year they declined again. I don't know what the answer is, but I thought it's important for the board to know that we are seeing a decline in the numbers going out to EDC. We've heard the reasons why from the industry, the drivers don't think that it's beneficial for them to do that. I don't have an answer, but I wanted to bring it to your good attention.
I think it's a price point.
I don't know. I've wondered that. I don't know. Probably,
Be interesting.
but I
to
don't have
know,
any data.
Is there any way, given your dual roles, you could charges?
I have no idea. I know that last year, the deputy and I both kind of went on the app to look at what rides were, and they were a little more expensive.
Yeah. But not
Dramatic. No, wasn't dramatic.
Wonder if it's UPTs. I said, I wonder if it's UPTs because people are getting serious. They're not just, they're not just picking people up. They're coming into town, renting buses, advertising on Craigslist and driving 30 people out there, you know.
And to your point, something that we found this year is the illegal operators are not parking their vehicle and standing by their vehicles. They're actually going into EDC and they're soliciting inside.
Right.
And it's so their vehicle, they're away from their vehicle. It's something that we're both agencies, the sister agency, like you said, we're looking at different tactics to try to combat the illegal transportation. We know it's a problem. Everybody knows it's a problem. We're doing what we can with the staffing and the overtime hours that we have. But I just very much appreciative of our enforcement staff and what they're doing, and the chief has brought fresh ideas, and I think we're trending in the right direction on the illegal transportation front. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Or questions on the statistical report?
So just in the future, when you give us the statistics and you break them down by captain and curb, you should probably tell us the total number of medallions we're talking about. Because I, for one, flip back and forth to see the magnitude type things that we're talking about. So number of trips, I don't necessarily worry about. I mean, I worry about it because I look at it, the average fare, but like trips and shifts, that sort of thing. And there's not that change, right? So for captain, about the same year to year. Actually may have gone up a little bit this year in terms of average fare and in terms of shifts, but very slightly. But I, for one, would like to know the number of medallions so that I know the magnitude, right? Because it doesn't mean anything. Like if you go from 1 to 2, it's a 50% increase. But you know, if you go from 100 to 101, it's different.
I need to ask a little more clarification on medallions.
So like,
Every medallion has every cab out there with a medallion on it has the opportunity to go and be a part of it. And so everybody that is on shift that day is with a medallion is able to go to pick up and drop off at EDC.
so you broke out the EDC stats to captain and curb.
Mhm.
I just want to know how big we're talking about in terms of, to say that there's 1,000 medallions and that there was only 800 trips is one thing, but to say that there was 500 medallions and 100 trips is a different
Okay,
number in my head.
So you want to know how many people were working those days, basically,
Or how many
and then
medallions are attributable to
Right.
cap
Per day.
Yeah,
per day vehicles on the road. Okay.
because then these numbers, I'm just looking at trends over years, and one's going one way and one's going the other. And then it makes me think, oh, is there something different between captain and curb? And I'm sure there is something different between captain and curb and how they market and everything else, but
It's like, there's Z trip in there too. It's
Yeah.
just a very small.
no. Yeah, please.
Z-Trip's numbers aren't in there, so captain's numbers don't include Z-Trip. So those are gonna be, I don't know if you have those numbers, but
We
our
do.
numbers are gonna be different because they're not in there. That's, they have like, what, 500 medallions compared to, it's not in there?
No, it's in there. We have those.
Yeah, but it's, but when you look at captain's numbers, they're gonna be,
Captain's numbers year over year.
But they aren't. You're right. It's just for this year.
But
You're right.
they adjusted their.
I just wanted to point that out. I just wanted to be.
It'll look strange looking year over year since they used to be in captain's numbers and they aren't any longer.
Well, there's a summary too, the EDC stats, and maybe we do that year over year too. And then we can look at the totals year over year.
Yeah, this is the first step we've done more with the numbers. So.
Took that stats class at UNLV during the summer. And you know what? It was really hard. It was at 8 o'clock every day, 4 days for about 6 weeks. So I want to use it.
No.
We have the same textbook, Ranch, How to Lie with Statistics. Anything further on?
No, sir.
Any
Thank you.
questions? Any further questions on works? Nope. Anything from legal counsel we need to know? Any future agenda items? We don't look like we have much business for July.
This, what you brought up today with Piclo, we'll keep track of that. Bring that back to the board when we need to.
On
Piclo.
Oh, yes.
But
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, Mr. Administrator, were you all going to follow back up with the question that was asked in terms of the decline in ridership as it relates to EDC? What was that all about? I mean, are we doing anything that we're collecting data, or are we asking riders, current riders, what would they like to see different from the industry? I mean, we understand that they have choices, here in Las Vegas, where whether it be Uber, whether it be a party bus, whether it be Maverick helicopter, or even a helicopter. I mean, they're doing that.
yeah, that helicopters are constantly going.
So, I mean, are we asking questions from the riders currently in terms of, would you ride in a taxi? If so, what would you like to see different? What is it that deters you from riding in a cab, or whatever the case might be, just so that we can have that data to understand what the industry's saying.
I will say, Member Weekly, thank you for the question. I will say that what this board has tried to do with the surcharge to get more drivers to go out there has helped. But as I just discussed, watching the last 3-year decline, the drivers obviously don't feel like it is beneficial for them to go out to the raceway and pick up riders. Uber and Lyft, they're out there all the time. And I have no information about them and how they're allocating their drivers to go out to EDC. As you said, I know that working with Insomniac, they have a passenger transportation portion to the ticket that they can purchase. And so the other sister agency, they have hundreds and hundreds of buses that come in from all over the country for EDC because they have a lot of people that purchase the ticket and that transportation. And as you said, helicopters. I mean, when I've worked out there, the helicopters are constant. I can't afford them, but there are people that go out to EDC and are doing that. To your point, I don't know what we're going to do to get the transportation better. I did not work EDC this year. I did work it last year. At 6 o'clock in the morning, we were calling for cabs to try to have more cabs come out there because we had a line of a couple hundred people. And luckily, we were able to get the message out. Cabs showed up. And of course, by the time several of them got there, the line had dwindled down and a lot of cab drivers were stuck out there with no ride. So it's always a balancing act every year to try to take care of the ridership. The last thing I think, me personally, I can't speak for any other agency or anything else, is to have a bunch of people on the road that shouldn't be on the road. So having taxis, the TNCs, the buses, the helicopters, to be able to go out and handle that transportation is much better than the alternative.
And
I hope that answered your question.
And I also I've stated this over the years, I want to state it again. It's not the administrator or the agency's job to market for the industry. The agency that regulates industry is very different from industry. So it's, our job is to enable industry to be competitive, but it's up to industry to go out there and do the job and look out for your industry and make sure that you're operating within the regulatory framework that we provide for you. But the administrator can't get you rides, can't market your cabs for you.
Any other questions? So takes us to agenda item 9, which is our second public comment session. This matters on our agenda for the purposes of receiving comments on matters within our jurisdiction. We may not take action on those items. Welcome comments from the public on matters within our jurisdiction, on matters that the board should be aware. It appears there are folks who want to make public comment.
Good morning, Michael Balin, Taxi Management. Member Deckron, if you remember a few months ago, we were riding up on the elevator and I had mentioned to you that we convert our vehicles to propane. You said you were not aware of that. So I just wanted to kind of let the board know. For over 30 years now, the founders of the company wanted to invest in the community and we've been converting our vehicles to propane. It's a very challenging project. These are EPA certified. The companies out of Copenhagen that we use, but they have a plant in North Carolina. Again, EPA certs is very expensive, and every year, like for example, this year the RAV4 from 2025 changed to 2026. Need a new EPA certification. We made huge investments in our infrastructure. We have 2 60,000-gallon propane tanks, 8 fueling stations on property. But when you talked about cleaner air to breathe, that's where it's at. We definitely made that commitment into the industry and the community. Do you want to add anything?
Asina Eliades, Taxi Management. So the other thing about using propane is that we're not on the power grid either. So we're even greener than an EV vehicle. And then on top of that, we have an application from Tesla before the NTA to put 5,000 robots onto the streets of Las Vegas. And lately it seems like the NTA is operating like the Wild Wild West. And we're highly regulated. And we have this company that's coming in that's EV. And if by some miracle the NTA doesn't put 5,000 robots on the streets, if we open this up to medallions for EV cars, then where are they going to come? We want to remain taxis as being taxis. And we've been zero emissions for like 30 years. My dad and the founders of the company did that. So I think that if Desert Cab wants more medallions, that, Desert Cab should ask for more medallions, but opening up, I think, puts the industry under threat, which we're already under threat. If we put 5,000 robo-taxis on the streets, we have, 3,500 medallions without Uber and Lyft? I mean, what are we going to do? When are they going to get the front doors of the casinos? That's our model. If we're opening up our medallions and changing everything so quickly when we don't know what's going on with tech, then how are we gonna continue?
And just one last thing for I pass it off to you. Come on, take them on. As far as EDC goes, I had heard the wind was a real challenge this year. I don't know how much that contributed to some of the numbers as well.
Mario LaCascia, the last taxi, a different topic. We're gonna go back to the pilot program. And I want to start with stats. You ask a sports bettor, he'll tell you how he lost his farm most of the time. They're not always accurate. What I'm trying to say is they forgot about the employee driver can't take Uber. It's already low. Plus he's got to give up the percentage. But the insight I want to point out is where's the negative? DA is getting more trips, more money. Uber is kind of balancing out their surges. And the companies are doing well too. So I don't see a negative on that whole pilot program where we're kind of looking at the numbers of stats. And that's what's like, as a company, Uber, Lyft, they have drivers, everybody's winning. So where's the hang up? That's all I want.
I'm not sure there was a hang up, Mario. I think that it was just.
Well, they were looking at the numbers that dropped.
Trend was going down, so we were trying to figure out.
I know, it's like when you go open a new restaurant, people come in the first couple of weeks and a couple of months. Is the repeat.
So they don't come back.
It's the repeat, it's the repeat, well, I saw it. It's the repeat that gets you going, right? So drivers are trying it. Obviously, employees like, well, what am I doing? It's already down at $5. I got to give a percentage. So lease drivers are liking it, mostly trying it back and forth. But the end game is there is no zero negative there that anybody could say it's bad. It's just a stat, which I know Graf likes.
And when I think that having that comment and everybody's comment from prior issues, is it sounds like more information's better.
But
And everybody needs to have the information to be able to make a decision. And you guys are trying to operate within the confines of the existing regulations. And do we need to address that, given the fact that there's other forces,
and I just want
large,
to close.
immense,
Billionaire forces, oh, trillionaire, sorry, as it was, trillionaire forces.
that there are other forces that are out there, and yeah, you want to address it. So, I mean, that's why you guys have a livery association that you can talk and everybody can put your heads together and see maybe what is good and what is not good. And I didn't see from the other agenda item number, was it 7 or 8, that their heels were dug in on anything. I think that it was more along the lines of, I took it as we've got other forces that are out there and we want to address it. And here's how we think we can address it by adding these other medallions. And certainly, I think that that would affect you all. And it would behoove everybody to have that joint conversation to see if that's how you want to proceed and exactly how people want to proceed. That's all I would say.
Can I close on the EDC matter? EDC matter is always the same mathematics. Going up, everybody wants to go up. But coming back, a driver has to deadhead. And when they get burned, like the administrator was pointing out, that they had the lines and dwindled the lines. And those drivers, when you get burned, it stays with them for years. And that's why coming back is always the hard part. That's what's causing that always in the morning where they run out of options. Because again, the math is pushing it to it where it goes. And a lot of guys get stuck with no ride. So now
Coming back.
Well,
Isn't that a dispatch issue of if somehow you had folks out there, you could tell them,
We did.
hey, there's nobody here to pick up, don't come.
Yeah, we always have a road supervisor out there for the entire show, sometimes several. But there's the delay, like they call them, it takes a little bit of time to be out there. So there's usually some stragglers, unfortunately.
there's no magic. Some guys are going to get burned. There's no perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment in the room?
Good morning. For the record, I'm Kimberly Maxon Rushton with the law firm Cooper Levinson, appearing on behalf of the Livery Operators Association. You just heard about an application that was filed before the NTA earlier this month in which Tesla is requesting 5,000 robo taxis. They specifically use the term taxi And I would respectfully submit that their operations are akin to a taxi. And so while they will initially be required to go before the NTA under 706B to obtain an AV TNC permit, I would respectfully submit that it does not extinguish your ability or your obligation to approve them to operate as a taxi. There's specific language under 706B that allows for this, and there's specific language under 706. My recommendation is that this body exercise its authority to require that they be submit an application for a taxi if they are permitted by the NTA to operate. And thereafter, you go through the same analysis that you go through with any new taxi application. Where is the market need? How will it impact your existing operators? And what will the conditions be that they operate under? This is unique to Nevada. So for 60 years, this industry has worked to come up to the number of 3,503 medallions. And now in 3,530. And in one sweep, an operator is going to come in and propose to operate 5,000 vehicles over the road. Remember, the same operator also operates under the road pursuant to the tunnel. So at some point, again, there's the consideration relative to the NTA's job to permit them as an AV, TNC, but there's also this obligation to determine whether or not they operate as a taxi, and you have a requirement to issue a certification to them as well. And I think it's important in that factor or in that consideration to look at anti-competitive and monopolistic behavior. We have this in gaming and in other agencies in which you see an operator coming in and they, in essence, monopolize the industry to a point where it does preclude passengers and other members of the industry from having a choice. And that constitutes anti-competitive behavior. So for those reasons, again, not only do we intend to participate actively in the NTA process, if allowed, consistently in the last handful of months, we've not been allowed to participate as an intervener. We will again file as one, and then thereafter, we will request that the TA require the robo-taxis, if permitted by the MTA, come before you to be permitted as a taxi.
Chair, I would like to address that, if I may.
Pardon?
I would like to address that, if I may.
We're not supposed to address. Can't take action.
Okay. Oh, I'm not going to take any action.
Oh.
So, without disagreeing with anything you said, I see an issue in that what you're talking about is a regulatory action, which the board does not have the authority to take, but the agency does, the administrator does. That would originate with the administrator. Problem is, the administrator is wearing two hats. And so I would suggest that while the administrator has an obligation to its licensee as the NTA deputy, whatever you are, commissioner, that there may or may not be some sort of conflict in his role as the administrator of the Taxicab Authority in regulating that entity from two different perspectives. I'm not suggesting that there is or is not a conflict, because I'm not a lawyer and everybody else here on the board is, but I would suggest that as a regulator, that it's probably a department issue that Administrator Park with both of his hats might want to request guidance from the department that oversees both of those agencies at which he's sharing his time.
And Member Decker, one of the things that we've contemplated is, again, if allowed to participate as an intervener in the NTA process, this is our objective. It's not only to demonstrate the negative impact it'll have on the industry, but also the fact that it's required to come before this body in order to obtain a taxi permit. So again, that's our steps in terms of how we want to operate, or at least to proceed with this matter. I think the other important thing is, if we're not allowed to intervene in that, we will petition this body to require them to come forward and obtain a taxi permit. Thank you again for your consideration.
Also, the ability to issue a cease and desist letter.
Yes, sir.
Ask the Attorney General's office to enjoin somebody from doing something.
Yes, sir.
Another action that would be taken by the administrator, though.
Would ask, the board has the authority to ask the Attorney General's office for representation.
So again, thank you for
We
considering.
may have to do it that way.
Right.
I understand your conflict. I'm not troubled that the board couldn't, go around that.
Okay.
That concludes, is there anybody remotely who would love to comment on us? Comment here? Great. That will close our second public comment session. That takes us to adjournment. Entertain.
So move. Second.
Any discussion? Favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Do we need a break or are you
Yeah,
guys
yes.
ready to go?
It's a break.
Okay, we will take a break for, it says 11:34. We'll come back on at 11:40. Want to be here too. I know. 1 o'clock.